Welcome to Zarila HOA Stories. Drop your country or city name in the comments, and make sure to subscribe and like this video. I still remember the sound of the wind through the branches of that old oak tree. Soft, peaceful, like the world itself was breathing. That tree wasn't just part of my yard, it was part of my life. My grandfather planted it 100 years ago, long before this neighborhood even existed. He used to say, "This tree will outlive all of us," and that's a good thing. And for the longest time, it did. It shaded our porch in the summers, sheltered us during storms, and watched over every family gathering, every laugh, every tear. When I lost my parents, I sat under that tree and felt closer to them than anywhere else. It was like their memory lived in its roots. So when I moved back into the family home, I thought I was returning to peace, to something safe and familiar. But peace doesn't last long when you live under an HOA. It started one afternoon when I noticed a woman standing in front of my yard, staring up at the tree. Clipboard in hand, sunglasses, and that look, the kind of look that tells you trouble is about to knock on your door. Her name was Karen, and of course, she was the new HOA president. She called out to me, "Ma'am, are you aware that your tree violates Section 8.2 of the Landscaping Code?" I laughed. I thought she was joking. "That tree's been here longer than this street," I said. Karen didn't even crack a smile. "It's within 6 feet of the sidewalk. It's a safety risk. It needs to be removed." I stared at her, speechless. Removed? That tree's been here for a century. It's perfectly healthy. She shrugged, jotting something down on her clipboard. "I'll send you a notice. Rules are rules. Rules are rules." That phrase would haunt me for months. At first, I thought I could talk my way through it. Reason with her, show her what that tree meant to my family. I even showed her an old photo of my grandfather planting it. She glanced at it for 2 seconds and said, "That's sweet, but it still violates the code." Then came the first letter, a notice of violation. A week later, another one. Then a fine. They claimed the roots were disrupting the sidewalk, even though the city inspector had cleared it years ago. Every night, I'd sit beneath that tree, listening to the branches move in the wind, wondering how something so alive could be considered a problem. I wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. But as the days passed, I started realizing they weren't going to stop. And when the envelope marked "Final Warning" showed up on my doorstep, I knew this fight had just begun. When I got that final warning letter from the HOA, I felt my stomach twist. The words were cold, emotionless, like they weren't written by a person at all. Failure to comply within 14 days will result in mandatory removal and continued fines. 14 days. That's all they were giving me to destroy something that had stood for a century. That night, I went outside barefoot and touched the tree's rough bark. The air was cool, the branches swaying softly, almost like it was whispering back to me. I said quietly, "Don't worry, I'm not letting them take you." The next morning, I decided to fight. I dug through old boxes in the attic and found documents my grandfather had kept, city permits, handwritten notes, even an article clipping from the local paper back in 1970s. It said the oak had been officially recognized by the city as a heritage tree. That had to mean something, right? I printed copies, highlighted everything, and went to the next HOA meeting. My hands were shaking, but my heart was steady. When it was my turn to speak, I stood up and said, "This tree isn't just mine, it's part of this town's history. It's protected by city record." Karen leaned back in her chair with that smug little grin. "Ma'am, the HOA's landscaping standards override outdated city designations. It's not personal, it's policy." Her words hit like ice. Policy? My family's legacy was just a checkbox on her form. I looked around the room, hoping for support. Most people looked away. A few avoided eye contact entirely. The silence in that room was heavier than any storm. After the meeting, an older neighbor, Tom, caught up with me in the parking lot. "I remember when your dad used to hang Christmas lights on that tree," he said softly. "It's wrong what they're doing." For a moment, I felt hope. "Please, will you speak up at the next meeting?" He hesitated. "I'd like to, but you know how they are. They'll come after me next." That's when it hit me. The HOA didn't just make rules. They controlled people with fear. Over the next few days, I got more letters, non-compliance, additional penalties, final notice. Every word felt like a knife twisting deeper. Then one morning, I walked outside and froze. There, wrapped around the trunk of my tree, was a small orange tag. It read, "Scheduled for removal." My heart dropped. I ripped it off and stormed back inside, dialing the HOA number again and again. No answer, just endless voicemail. The next day, a white pickup truck stopped in front of my house. The logo read, "City Contract Services." A man stepped out with a clipboard. "You must be Mrs. Brooks? We're here about the tree removal order." I ran to him. "You can't do that. That tree's protected." He frowned. "We have authorization from your HOA. If you want to stop it, you'll need to resolve it with them." My throat tightened. "Please give me some time. I'm appealing this." He sighed. "I'll hold off for now. You've got 1 week before we're required to proceed." 7 days. 7 days to save the one living memory I had left of my family. And that's when I decided, if they wanted to fight, I'd give them one they wouldn't forget. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that orange tag on the tree, scheduled for removal. It felt like a death sentence. My mind kept replaying my grandfather's voice saying, "This tree will protect you when I can't." And now I was supposed to stand by and let a group of neighbors with too much power and too little heart destroy it? No, I wasn't giving up that easily. The next morning, I made coffee, sat down at my kitchen table, and began writing. I drafted a petition, saved the heritage oak, and printed 50 copies. Then I started knocking on doors. Most people were polite but hesitant. Some didn't want to get involved. "I'm sorry," one woman said, glancing nervously over her shoulder. "Karen's already warned us not to sign anything against the board." Warn them? That word burned in my chest. But not everyone was afraid. Tom, the older neighbor who'd spoken to me before, signed first. "That tree's been here longer than any of us," he said. It's time someone stood up to her. After Tom, more people slowly began to support me. Quietly, carefully, they whispered their agreement, but asked me not to tell anyone. It was like living in a neighborhood ruled by fear. By the end of the day, I had 12 signatures. Not enough, but a start. I posted about it on the community's social page, attaching photos of the oak in all its glory through the decades. Within hours, the post was flooded with comments. Some people wrote, "That tree's beautiful. They shouldn't touch it." Others said, "The HOA can't just erase history." But just as quickly, the post disappeared, deleted. Then came a message in my inbox from Karen herself. "Please refrain from spreading misinformation about HOA decisions. This kind of activity can result in disciplinary action." I couldn't believe it. Disciplinary action? For trying to save a tree? That night, I sat under the oak again. The wind rustled the leaves gently, and a few fell into my lap. I picked one up, brown dry, shaped like a heart, and whispered, "I'll protect you, I promise." The next morning, I walked out to check the mailbox, half expecting another threat. Instead, I found something different, an envelope with no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Check the new HOA development proposal. Page 7. Follow the money. No name. No signature. My hand shook as I went online and found the HOA's proposal document buried on their website. Page 7 hit me like a punch. It listed Phase 2 beautification plans, including a new parking area and pathway extension, right where my oak tree stood. So that was it. It wasn't about safety. It wasn't about sidewalk rules. They wanted my tree gone because they needed space for their next project. I printed the page, circled the section, and showed it to Tom. His eyes widened. "They're planning a whole expansion," he said, "and they're using safety as a cover." I felt the anger rise inside me. Not the kind that makes you yell, but the kind that makes you act. That weekend, I went door to door again, this time with proof. People started listening. They weren't just signing for a tree anymore. They were signing because they'd had enough of the HOA's lies. By Sunday evening, I had 57 signatures. The tide was turning. But then, as I was heading back inside, I noticed a black SUV parked across the street. Karen was inside, staring at me. No smile, no clipboard, just watching. A chill ran down my spine. The next morning, a letter appeared in my mailbox, hand-delivered, no stamp. Cease your unauthorized petition immediately. Failure to do so will result in legal action. Legal action. They were trying to scare me, but it was too late for that, because now I had proof and a neighborhood that was finally starting to wake up. And I wasn't stopping until the truth came out. The letter sat on my kitchen counter all night. Cease your unauthorized petition immediately. Those words kept echoing in my mind. It didn't just sound like a threat. It sounded like a warning. By morning, I had barely slept. Every creak in the house made me jump. I walked outside just as the sun was rising, the light filtering through the oak's leaves, and I promised myself, they can threaten, they can fine, but they will not break me. That day, I made copies of everything. The anonymous note, the HOA proposal, the petition, every violation notice I'd received. I stored them all in a folder labeled Truth. Then I started calling local news stations. Most didn't answer. A few said, "We'll look into it," in that tone that really means we won't. Still, I kept trying. I emailed the city's historical preservation office, attaching photos of the oak, explaining its heritage status. I didn't know if they'd respond, but I had to believe someone would listen. By afternoon, I noticed something strange. My mailbox flag was down, but I hadn't checked my mail yet. Inside, there was another unmarked envelope. My heart pounded as I opened it. This one wasn't typed. It was handwritten. They're having an emergency board meeting tonight. Topic: non-compliant property at 114 Maple Lane. Don't let them vote without you. 114 Maple Lane. My address. I looked at the clock. 6:45 p.m. The meeting started at 7. I grabbed my folder and drove straight to the clubhouse, heart racing. When I walked in, everyone went quiet. Karen sat at the front with her usual clipboard and that perfect fake smile. "Ah, Mrs. Brooks," she said. "We were just discussing your property." "I know," I said, slamming my folder on the table. "And I have something you might want to see." The board members exchanged looks. Karen raised an eyebrow. "This isn't on the agenda." "It should be," I snapped, pulling out the printed proposal. "You lied. This isn't about safety. You're removing that tree to make room for your new parking area." A murmur rippled through the room. One of the board members, a younger guy named Eric, leaned forward. "Is that true?" he asked Karen. Karen didn't flinch. "The board's decisions are based on safety and community improvement." I held up the city's heritage certification. "That tree is protected by the city. If you touch it, you'll be breaking state law." That's when Karen's smile finally cracked. "This meeting is over," she said, gathering her papers. But the room didn't move. Eric spoke again, louder this time. "She deserves a hearing. Let her appeal the decision." The rest of the board looked uncomfortable. One woman nodded slowly. "It's only fair." Karen glared at her, but finally said, "Fine. Mrs. Brooks, you'll have 5 minutes to present your case at next week's meeting." It wasn't a victory. Not yet, but it was a pause. A lifeline. When I got home, I felt lighter for the first time in weeks. I sat beneath the oak with my coffee, listening to the crickets. For a moment, it almost felt normal again. But that peace didn't last. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of shouting outside. 2 HOA maintenance workers were standing by the tree, holding chainsaws. I ran out barefoot. "What are you doing?" One of them looked uncomfortable. "We got orders to start trimming." "Trimming?" I shouted. "You mean cutting it down?" He hesitated. "Talk to the president, ma'am. We're just following orders." "Karen," I screamed, "you can't do this. We have a hearing next week." She was there, standing on the sidewalk, arms crossed. "We're not removing it. We're performing maintenance for safety reasons." But I could see the cut marks already on one of the lower branches. Big, deep, bleeding sap. I grabbed my phone and started recording. "You touch that tree again, and I'll have you charged with destruction of protected property." The workers stopped. Karen's expression hardened. "You're making this harder than it needs to be, Mrs. Brooks." "No," I said, my voice shaking. "You are." She walked away without another word, but her look said everything. This wasn't over. That night, I posted the video online, the workers, the chainsaws, the damage. I didn't expect much, but within a few hours, it started spreading. People commented things like, "How can an HOA do this?" And "That tree's beautiful. They should be ashamed." By morning, the post had thousands of views. And that's when I got a call, Not from Karen, not from the HOA, but from a reporter. I saw your video, she said. Would you be willing to talk on camera about what's happening? My hands trembled. Yes, I whispered. Yes, I will. The next morning, the reporter's car pulled into my driveway just as the sun came up. She stepped out with a small camera crew and a calm smile that somehow made me feel like I wasn't completely alone anymore. Her name was Emily, and she had that look of quiet determination that told me she'd seen people like Karen before, the ones who hid behind rules to control others. We sat beneath the oak tree as the camera started rolling. The morning light fell softly through the branches, and for the first time in weeks, I felt proud instead of afraid. I told her everything. The letters, the threats, the fake safety concerns. Even tonight, I found the hose slashing marks on one of the roots from when they'd secretly tried to inspect it. Emily listened carefully, nodding as I spoke. When I finished, she said, "This isn't just about a tree, is it?" I shook my head. No, it's about respect. My father planted this tree before I was born. It's been part of our family for 3 generations. My children took their first steps under it. My husband proposed to me right here. It's not just wood and leaves, it's our history. She smiled sadly. People need to hear that. The interview aired that evening. My phone buzzed nonstop for hours. Strangers were sharing the story, tagging local officials, and demanding that the HOA stop. The comments made me cry. People saying they'd gone through the same thing, that they lost something they loved to an HOA's cruelty. By the next morning, the HOA office was swarmed with calls and emails. Karen must have been furious, because when I stepped outside to get the mail, she was already waiting at the end of my driveway, sunglasses on, arms crossed like a statue. "Good morning," she said, her voice sharp as broken glass. "I see you've decided to make this community a circus." I took a deep breath. "People deserve to know what you're doing." "What we're doing," she snapped. "You live here too, remember? And now everyone thinks this neighborhood is toxic, thanks to you." "Maybe it is," I said quietly, "if people like you are running it." Her jaw clenched. She took a step closer, lowering her voice. "You've made a big mistake, Mrs. Brooks. You think the internet will save you? You think these people care? They'll move on in a week, and you'll still be stuck here, with fines, violations, and no allies left." But she was wrong. I already had allies. When she stormed off, my neighbor Eric, the young board member from before, came walking over. "I saw that," he said. "She's losing control. The rest of the board's starting to question her leadership. Do you think they'll stop her?" I asked. He hesitated. "Not unless someone can prove what she's hiding." I frowned. "What do you mean?" Eric looked around before lowering his voice. "There's something off with the HOA budget. Karen approved a beautification project months ago, but the funds were transferred to a private account. She's planning to pave this area for a private parking lot she's leasing to the nearby event hall. That tree's in her way." My stomach twisted. "So, it's about money." He nodded. "Always is." That night, I sat by the window with the folder documents. Every letter, every fine, all of it suddenly looked like part of a bigger plan. I went online and searched for public HOA records, cross-referencing every expenditure. And there it was, a line item labeled maintenance and grounds expansion. The listed cost? Over $45,000. The recipient? Maple Holdings, LLC. I didn't know much about business names, but that one stood out. Maple, the same name as our street. I dug deeper. The company was registered to Karen's husband. My hands started to shake. It wasn't about safety. It wasn't about community aesthetics. It was greed, plain and simple. By midnight, I had screenshots, copies, and records all saved on a flash drive. I sent everything to Emily, the reporter, with a single message. "She's been lying. Here's the proof." The next day, the story hit every local news outlet. HOA president accused of fraud and property destruction. Karen's smiling photo was plastered beside the headline. By evening, I heard shouting from her house. Angry voices slammed doors. The HOA board called an emergency meeting again, this time without her. I didn't go. I didn't need to, because for the first time in months, the Oak and I finally had someone else fighting for us. Still, deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that Karen wouldn't go down quietly. People like her never do. And I was right. 3 nights later, I woke up to the sound of something snapping outside, like wood splintering under pressure. I ran to the window, and what I saw made my blood run cold. Someone was standing under the oak with a chainsaw. The sound ripped through the quiet like thunder. A deep, ugly roar, the unmistakable whine of a chainsaw. For a split second, I couldn't move. My heart froze in my chest. Then instinct took over. I grabbed my phone and ran barefoot out the door, my robe flapping behind me. The night was pitch black except for the faint glow of my porch light. And there, under the silver spread of the 100-year-old oak, stood a shadowed figure. The chainsaw buzzed again, sparks flashing as the blade bit into the bark. "Hey!" I screamed, my voice breaking. "Stop!" The figure jerked, startled, then dropped the saw and bolted. I sprinted after them, my feet slapping the cold pavement. They darted between the hedges, heading toward the back exit that led to the HOA clubhouse. I could just make out a dark hoodie and a glint of blonde hair. "Karen!" I knew it was her. "Karen!" I yelled, but she didn't turn around. By the time I reached the corner, she was gone, swallowed by the shadows. I ran back to the tree, panting. My hands trembled as I lifted my phone's flashlight. What I saw made me gasp. A deep cut running along the base of the trunk, sap bleeding out like tears. It wasn't fatal, but it was deliberate. That wasn't vandalism. It was a warning. I called the police, my voice shaking as I explained what happened. They arrived within 15 minutes, flashing lights, radios crackling. One of the officers walked around the tree, his brow furrowing. "You're lucky you caught them before they got any deeper," he said. "Can you do anything?" I asked. He sighed. "We'll file a report, but unless you saw their face clearly or have camera footage, it'll be tough to prove." My throat tightened. "She'll just keep coming back." "Then get cameras," he said gently, "and stay inside at night. Whoever this is, they wanted to scare you." After they left, I sat under the wounded oak until sunrise. I could smell the cut, raw, fresh, alive. My heart ached like it was my own skin that had been sliced open. That morning, I ordered motion sensors, security lights, and 3 cameras. I wasn't letting anyone near that tree again. Later that afternoon, I saw Karen's car slowly roll by my house. Her window was down just enough for me to catch the smirk on her face. She waved, a small, taunting gesture, and drove off. I recorded all. Every smirk, every glance, every visit. I started documenting everything like evidence in a trial. The next HOA meeting came fast. This time, Karen wasn't leading it. Eric was. The room buzzed with tension. When I walked in, conversation stopped. Some neighbors gave me sympathetic smiles. Others avoided my gaze. Eric cleared his throat. Tonight's agenda includes the recent allegations against the HOA president and discussion of community safety concerns. Karen sat near the back, pretending to look unaffected, but I could see the cracks. Her confidence was gone. When it was my turn to speak, I stood up slowly, holding my folder of evidence. 2 nights ago, someone tried to cut down my tree. I believe it was an act of retaliation. The same tree this board has been trying to remove under false pretenses. Karen scoffed loudly. "Oh, please. Are we really doing this?" I looked straight at her. "You were seen near my property that night." Her face twitched. "That's ridiculous." "Really?" I said, pulling out a photo one my neighbor had taken from their window. It wasn't perfect, but the figure in the hoodie was clearly female, and the car parked nearby was unmistakably hers. The room went silent. Eric took the photo, studying it carefully. "Karen, is that your car?" She hesitated too long. "Anyone could have a black SUV, but only one has the same custom license plate," Eric said quietly, reading from the photo. Karen's face drained of color. Within minutes, the board voted to suspend her pending investigation. She stormed out, shouting threats about lawsuits and defamation, but no one stopped her. The door slammed, and for the first time, the clubhouse felt lighter, like someone had opened a window after a long storm. After the meeting, Eric approached me. "You did it," he said. "She's out for now." But I wasn't celebrating. I looked toward my home, where the oak stood silhouetted against the setting sun. "She won't stop," I whispered. "People like her don't just disappear." They wait. They plot. And I was right again. Because that night, I received an email from an unknown address. The subject line read, "You should have let the tree go." No message, just a single attachment, a picture of me sitting under the oak that morning, taken from across the street. The moment I saw that picture, a cold wave of dread ran through me. It wasn't just fear anymore, it was violation. Someone had been watching me, close enough to take that photo from the street, maybe even hiding in the shadows while I sat under the oak. My first thought was Karen, but the email address didn't have her name. It was just random letters and numbers. Still, I could feel her fingerprints all over it, the kind of pettiness wrapped in cruelty that only she could deliver. I forwarded the email straight to the police. They said they'd look into it, but I could tell it wasn't a priority. To them, it was just an anonymous threat. To me, it was proof that this wasn't over. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the couch with every light in the house turned on, the sound of the ticking clock echoing through the silence. Every time I looked out the window, I swore I saw a movement, a flicker of shadow, the faint reflection of headlights pausing too long. Around 2 a.m., I finally got up and walked outside. The air was cold and sharp. The oak stood quietly in the darkness, its wounded trunk wrapped in the protective tape the arborist had applied earlier that day. I touched the bark gently. "I won't let them win," I whispered. "You've stood for 100 years. You'll stand 100 more." The wind rustled through the leaves, almost like it was answering me. A few days later, Emily, the reporter, called again. Her voice sounded urgent. "We got something," she said. "The HOA's finances are being audited. Turns out there's over $60,000 missing from community funds. The investigators think it ties back to Karen's husband's company." My chest tightened. "Are they going to press charges?" "They're close," she said. "But they'll need statements, proof from residents who saw the misuse firsthand. I know this has been hard, but your voice could help end this." I hesitated. "If I speak again, they'll come after me harder." "Maybe," she said softly. "But maybe it's time they realize they can't scare you anymore." That night, I decided to do the interview. Not just for the oak, but for every person who'd ever been bullied by an HOA that forgot what community really meant. The following morning, Emily and her crew came back. We filmed by the tree again, its branches swaying gently behind me. I spoke from the heart, about the memories, the intimidation, and the sleepless nights. I didn't hold back. "This isn't about landscaping or safety," I said to the camera. "It's about greed and power. They try to take away something that can't be replaced. But what they didn't understand is that this tree doesn't just belong to me. It belongs to everyone who ever believed in standing up for what's right." When the piece aired, it exploded online. People shared it across social media, tagging state officials, journalists, even environmental activists. The story went national within a week. Suddenly, the HOA's quiet little world wasn't so quiet anymore. Petitions started circulating, demanding Karen's removal and legal investigation. Protesters showed up outside the HOA office with signs that read, "Save the Oak" and "Stop HOA Abuse." For the first time, I wasn't the only one fighting. But fame came with a price. The more people supported me, the more the threats escalated. My phone filled with blocked calls, whispering voices telling me to drop it. My mailbox was stuffed with fake violation notices and signed letters saying things like, "You'll regret this." One morning, I woke up to find red spray paint across my garage door. "Traitor." My knees buckled. I just stood there, staring at the word dripping down the paint, feeling the anger and exhaustion flood in all at once. That evening, Eric came over. "You should stay somewhere else for a few days," he said gently. "We'll have the board handle the vandalism, and the police can increase patrols." "I'm not leaving," I said quietly. "If I leave, they win." He nodded, understanding. "Then we'll make sure you're protected." For the next few nights, Eric and a few neighbors took turns watching the street. They even installed a motion light on my driveway. It helped a little, but deep down, I still felt it, that invisible pressure, that unseen gaze. Then, one night, as I was about to lock up, I heard something outside again. A soft creak, like footsteps on gravel. I turned off the light and peeked through the blinds. A car idled at the corner, headlights off. After a moment, The driver's door opened, and even from the distance, I recognized her silhouette. Karen. She stood there for a while, just staring at my house. Then she reached into the back seat and pulled something out. My stomach twisted as I saw it. A gas can. I didn't think. I just grabbed my phone and dialed 911, my hands shaking. Someone's outside my house. I whispered. She has gasoline. The dispatcher told me to stay inside, stay quiet, and lock every door. Within minutes, red and blue lights filled the street. Karen tried to run, but the police caught her halfway down the block. They found a gas can, a lighter, and a printed photo of my oak tree inside her car. It was finally over. At least, that's what I wanted to believe. But as they took her away, she turned her head just enough to look at me. Her eyes wild, furious, unrepentant. And she smiled. That same cold, knowing smile. And deep down, I realized something terrible. Karen might be gone for now, but the hatred she'd planted in this community, that wouldn't disappear overnight. For a few quiet days, it almost felt like peace had returned. The police cars stopped patrolling every hour, the street fell silent again, and I could finally breathe without that constant knot in my chest. But deep down, I knew the silence was only temporary, the kind that comes after a storm, when the air is still heavy with what's yet to come. Karen's arrest made headlines. HOA president charged with harassment and attempted property destruction. The article ran with her mugshot, the perfect suburban smile replaced by cold fury. The comments poured in, mostly people cheering that justice was finally being served. But not everyone saw it that way. By the third day, a few neighbors started whispering again. I could feel it, the sideways glances when I walked to the mailbox, the abrupt end of conversations when I passed. Some people didn't like that I'd gone public. They thought I'd embarrassed the neighborhood, lowered property values, made everyone look bad. At the next HOA gathering, the first one without Karen, the atmosphere was tense. Eric stood at the front, trying to keep order. "We're moving forward," he said. "Karen's actions don't represent this community, and we'll be conducting a full review of all financial records." A voice from the back interrupted him. "And what about her?" I turned. It was Tom Jenkins, a middle-aged neighbor with a permanent scowl. "She's the reason the media was crawling all over this place," he said, jabbing a finger in my direction. "She turned our neighborhood into a circus." Eric raised his hand. "Tom, that's enough." "No, it's not." Tom snapped. "We all love that tree, but she didn't have to drag our name through the mud. My property value dropped 15 grand since this nonsense hit the news." I stood, my voice calm but shaking. "So, I should have just stayed quiet while Karen tried to destroy everything my family built?" Tom crossed his arms. "You could have handled it privately." I laughed bitterly. "Privately? She came after me with chainsaws and gasoline, Tom. What would you have done? Invited her for tea." The room went silent. After the meeting, half the neighbors came to pat my shoulder, whispering "good job," while the other half avoided me entirely. That's when I realized the truth. The HOA might have lost its dictator, but it hadn't lost its division. Karen had poisoned the roots deeper than anyone knew. The days that followed were strange. The oak stood tall again, its wounds healing under the arborist's care. Reporters stopped coming by. Life was supposed to be normal. But every time I walked outside, I saw something new, subtle things that didn't feel right. A neighbor who used to wave now turned away. Someone slashed one of my garden hoses. My trash cans were knocked over every morning. Once, I found a dead bird at the base of the oak. No explanation, no sign of an animal nearby. Then came the letters again. No return address. Each one just a few words, scrawled in black marker. "You don't belong here. Sell before it's too late. The tree dies next." I showed Eric, and he promised to help, but I could tell he was exhausted too. "We're doing what we can," he said, rubbing his forehead. "The board's in chaos. Half of them want to dissolve the HOA entirely. Maybe that's not a bad thing," I said quietly. He gave me a sad smile. "Maybe not, but people need structure. Even bad structure feels safer than none." That night, I sat under the oak again, the branches whispering above me. For the first time, I noticed something almost miraculous. Tiny green shoots sprouting from the wounded trunk. New life pushing through the scarred bark. I smiled through my tears. "You're tougher than me, old friend," I whispered. The next morning, Emily called again. "The city council's planning to honor the oak," she said. "They're designating it a protected heritage landmark. It means no one, not the HOA, not private contractors, can ever touch it again without state approval." For the first time in months, I felt something like joy. That's incredible." She laughed. "You did it. You saved it." That afternoon, the city workers came to install a small bronze plaque at the base of the tree. It read, "The Brooks Oak, planted 1923, protected 2025." A symbol of perseverance and community. Neighbors gathered, some clapping, others just watching in silence. I caught Eric's smile from across the crowd. For a brief moment, it felt like unity again, like maybe, just maybe, this neighborhood could heal. But as the sun dipped below the rooftops and the people started to leave, I noticed someone standing far across the street, just outside the light's reach. A woman, still silent, watching. Her posture was too familiar. Before I could even call out, she turned and disappeared into the dark. And my heart dropped when I remembered something the officer had said after Karen's arrest. They only charged her with harassment and attempted destruction. She made bail within 24 hours. The peace I'd started to believe in shattered in a heartbeat. The storm wasn't over. It was only circling back. The next few nights felt like walking through a dream that was slowly turning into a nightmare again. Every sound outside my window made me flinch. Every rustle of leaves felt like footsteps. I told myself I was imagining things, that Karen wouldn't dare come near after what she'd done, but deep down I knew better. People like her didn't give up, they obsessed. A week after the plaque was installed, I started noticing small things. The motion sensor light on my driveway flickered off for no reason. One of my cameras stopped working, even though the app said it was connected. Then one morning I woke up to find muddy footprints across my porch, footprints that stopped right beneath the oak. That's when I called the police again. The officer they sent was kind but tired. "We've been keeping an eye on her," he said. "Karen's out on bail, yes, but she's under strict supervision. She's not supposed to be anywhere near this neighborhood." "Well, someone was," I said, showing him the footprints. He nodded, snapping photos. "We'll increase patrols. But if you see her, call us immediately. Don't confront her alone." That night, I couldn't bring myself to sleep inside. I set up a chair by the window, facing the oak, a flashlight, and phone in my lap. I must have drifted in and out because sometime after midnight, I heard it, the faint crunch of gravel. I froze. Through the curtain, I saw movement. A shadow, then another. Someone was walking around the base of the oak, shining a small light on the trunk. My stomach dropped. I dialed 911, whispering, "She's here again." The dispatcher asked me to stay on the line, but before the sirens could reach, I stepped out onto the porch. My voice trembled, but I forced it out. "Karen, I know it's you." The figure straightened. The flashlight turned toward me, blinding me for a second. Then, slowly, she lowered it, and I saw her face. It was Karen, pale, wild-eyed, hair disheveled, her expression somewhere between anger and desperation. "You ruined everything," she hissed. "My name, my home, my husband's business, all because of that tree." "It wasn't me," I said, my voice shaking. "It was your greed, Karen. You did this to yourself." She took a step closer, clutching something in her hand, a hammer. "You think that tree's your legacy? It's a curse. It destroyed me. Now I'll destroy it." "Karen, don't." But she was already moving, swinging the hammer toward the trunk. I ran forward, grabbing her arm. She screamed and shoved me back hard. My head hit the ground, the world spinning. The hammer clanged against the bark, leaving a deep dent. For a moment, everything blurred. Her face above me, the oak towering behind her, the sound of sirens in the distance growing louder. "Stop!" I shouted, forcing myself to my feet. "This ends now." Karen turned toward me, tears streaking her face. "You think you're the hero," she spat, her voice breaking. "But they'll turn on you too. You'll see, they always do." Before she could swing again, the flashing lights flooded the yard. Officers rushed in, pulling her away as she screamed and kicked. The hammer fell from her hands. As they dragged her toward the car, she twisted to look at me one last time. Her eyes glistened in the red and blue lights, full of hate and something else, regret, maybe, or madness. "You can't protect it forever," she shouted. "You can't protect anything forever." Then she was gone. The officers stayed until sunrise, taking statements, marking evidence. One of them looked up at the oak and shook his head. "That woman's lucky you called when you did," he said. "She was seconds away from doing real damage." I nodded silently, staring at the wound on the bark. Another scar, another reminder. Over the next few days, the neighborhood changed again. Some people left notes of support on my porch, flowers, cards, even small ornaments shaped like acorns. Others still refused to look me in the eye. But I didn't care anymore. The oak was safe, and I was done hiding. Emily came by to film one final interview. She stood beside me as the morning light filtered through the leaves. "Karen's been taken into custody again," she said quietly. "They're pressing full charges this time. Fraud, harassment, vandalism, and attempted arson. She won't be back." I took a deep breath, looking up at the oak. "Good," I said softly, "because this tree has had enough pain." She turned to me. "So what happens now?" I smiled faintly. "Now, I rebuild. The tree stands, I stand." Maybe that's how healing starts, one root, one breath at a time. The camera caught the way the sunlight hit the plaque, the way the branches swayed above us. It was quiet, peaceful, the kind of peace you earn after fighting far too long for it. But as I turned to go inside, a single acorn dropped beside my foot. I bent down to pick it up, holding it gently in my palm. A seed, a beginning. And for the first time, I knew this wasn't just the end of a battle. It was the start of something new. Still, as I looked back one last time, I couldn't help but whisper under my breath, "Rest easy, old friend. We made it." The oak's leaves rustled softly, like an answer, or maybe like a sigh of relief. For the first time in months, the neighborhood was quiet. No HOA notices on my door. No confrontations. No late-night whispers of gossip echoing through the cul-de-sac. Just silence, and the steady rustle of the oak leaves swaying in the morning wind. Karen was gone. Officially, permanently. The board had disbanded after her arrest, unable to recover from a scandal. What remained of the HOA was a skeleton crew, a few neighbors who were trying to make amends, as they put it. But I didn't want amends. I wanted peace. Still, I couldn't help but feel the weight of everything that had happened. Every morning I'd step outside and look at the scar where Karen had struck the tree. The mark wasn't deep enough to kill it, but it stood out, a raw, dark wound against the old bark. I ran my fingers over it once, whispering, "You've survived worse, haven't you?" And somehow, I swear, the leaves rustled as if answering me. A few days later, a letter arrived. It wasn't from the HOA. It was from the local historical society. They had seen Emily's documentary and wanted to recognize the oak as a protected heritage tree. My breath caught as I read the words. It meant no one, not a board, not a neighbor, not even a city official, could ever touch it again without my consent. When I called Emily to tell her, she nearly screamed with joy. "That's incredible," she said. "Do you realize what that means? That tree's legacy is officially untouchable now." "I think it always was," I said softly. "They just needed to see it." We decided to host a small neighborhood gathering under the oak. Not a protest, not a celebration, just a quiet evening of remembrance and renewal. Word spread quickly, and on the day of the event, people showed up with candles, photos, and handwritten notes. Even the ones who once sided with Karen came. I could see guilt in their eyes as they approached. One woman, the same neighbor who had shouted at me to just follow the rules months ago, came up holding a small jar of soil. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice trembling. "My father planted this in our yard 30 years ago. I wanted to mix some of it here, if you'll let me. A new start." I nodded, tears burning my eyes. Of course, the oak has room for everyone. As the sun set, the candles glowed like fireflies around the roots. Emily filmed quietly, capturing the faces lit by warm light, the branches silhouetted against the twilight. I took a deep breath and spoke softly, not to the camera, but to the people. This tree stood here long before any of us. It gave shade, it held memories, and it reminded us that strength isn't about power, it's about patience. My grandfather used to say the oak doesn't fight the storm, it bends with it, and then it stands again. I think we've all been bending for too long. It's time to stand again. A hush fell over the crowd. Then someone began to clap, and others followed. The sound grew, gentle, grateful, full of something I hadn't felt in a long time. Unity. After everyone left, I stayed beneath the oak alone. The stars peeked through the branches. I could still smell the candles, hear the faint hum of voices fading down the street. And for the first time, the silence wasn't heavy, it was peaceful. I sat at the base of the trunk, tracing the old scars with my hand. "We did it," I whispered. "They see you now." Then, in the stillness, I remembered something my grandfather once told me when I was a child. A tree isn't just a tree when it holds your stories. It becomes your witness. And that's exactly what it felt like the oak had been watching all along, keeping record of every tear, every betrayal, every act of courage. It had seen generations pass, storms rage, hearts break and heal. And through it all, it had kept standing. Before heading inside, I picked up the small acorn I'd been carrying in my pocket since the night Karen attacked. I walked to the far corner of the yard, dug a small hole, and placed in the earth. "Grow strong," I murmured, "but be wiser than we were." As I covered it with soil, the wind picked up again, swirling through the leaves of the great oak. It was as if the tree was blessing its descendant, the next generation of roots. When I looked back toward the house, I caught my reflection in the window. Older, yes, but lighter somehow. The fear was gone. The anger, too. All that remained was a deep sense of gratitude. The oak had given me more than a fight. It had given me purpose. That night, before bed, I stood by the window one last time. The candles outside had burned down to faint embers, glowing like fallen stars around the roots. And just before I turned away, I saw it. A small green sprout poking from the soil where I'd planted the acorn. It was barely visible, fragile, and new, but it was there. Life continuing. Morning came quietly that day, wrapped in gold sunlight and birdsong. The air smelled clean, alive, the way it used to before all the HOA battles, before the endless letters, before Karen's shadow stretched across everything. For the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't wake up with a pit in my stomach. No anxiety, no dread, just peace. The oak stood proudly outside my window, its leaves shimmering in the early light. I could see the scar from where the hammer had struck, but it no longer looked like a wound. It looked like history, proof that survival sometimes leaves marks, but beauty can still grow around them. The small sprout I planted weeks ago was growing faster than I expected. Every morning, I watered it gently, whispering to it like I used to whisper to the oak as a kid. "You're part of something big now," I'd say. "You're a story that started long before me." One morning, as I was checking the new sapling, a familiar voice called from behind. It was Emily, camera in hand, her smile bright. "You won't believe this," she said, rushing up the driveway. The story went viral again. Over 2 million views in 2 days. People from all over the world are writing about your tree. I blinked in disbelief. 2 million. "Yup," she said, flipping her camera screen toward me. The video showed clips of the oak, the plaque, and the candlelight vigil. The comment section was flooded with messages. "Cry my eyes out watching this. Reminds me of my granddad's apple tree. This isn't just about a tree. It's about standing up for what matters." That HOA lady represents everything wrong with power and control. Nature always wins in the end. I smiled, but my chest tightened with emotion. It wasn't about the numbers or the views. It was that people understood. They saw the meaning behind it all. The oak wasn't just my story anymore. It was everyone's. Over the next few weeks, people began visiting. Strangers from nearby towns would stop by, taking quiet photos of the oak, reading the plaque, leaving little trinkets at the base, feathers, shells, folded notes. One elderly man left a carved wooden heart that read, "For all that endures." At first, I didn't know how to feel about the attention. I'd fought so hard to protect my privacy during all this, and now my home had become a symbol, a kind of sanctuary. But the more I watched people approach the tree, the more I realized they weren't here for me. They were here for hope. One afternoon, a little girl came with her father. She wore a pink sun hat and carried a small watering can. She looked up at the oak, her eyes wide with wonder. "Daddy, is this the magic tree from the video?" she asked. Her father smiled. "It's the one, sweetheart." She knelt down and poured water gently over the roots of the new sapling I'd planted. "Now it won't be lonely," she said with a grin. My throat tightened. That simple gesture, innocent, pure, said everything words couldn't. Later that evening, I sat on the porch, watching the sunset spill through the branches. Emily had packed up her camera after another short interview, and the quiet had returned. But this silence was different. It wasn't empty. It was full of life, full of continuance. A soft knock came at the fence gate. It was Tom, one of the former HOA board members, the same man who had once voted to have a tree cut down. He held a small paper bag. "I brought these," he said awkwardly. "Cookies. My wife baked them. She wanted me to apologize again." I gestured for him to sit. "You already did," I said. "I know," he sighed, "but I can't stop thinking about how blind we were. We thought rules kept things fair. We didn't realize we were destroying what made this place worth living in." I looked at him for a long moment before replying softly, "Sometimes it takes losing something sacred to see what matters." He nodded, his eyes glistening. "We're starting something new," he said. "No more rigid HOA, no more power plays. Just a neighborhood committee that listens. And we'd like you to lead it." I laughed lightly, shaking my head. "Me? After everything?" "Because of everything," he said simply. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I looked up at the oak, its branches stretching wide as if embracing the sky. For a moment, I could almost see my grandfather standing there, his old hat tilted, his hands in his pockets, smiling proudly. "I'll think about it," I said finally. "But thank you." As Tom left, I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes, listening to the leaves whisper overhead. I thought about everything the tree had witnessed: decades of laughter, arguments, growth, pain, and rebirth. And then a realization struck me. This wasn't just about me saving a tree. The tree had saved me. It had kept me grounded when everything else felt unstable. It had given me courage when fear tried to silence me. And it had reminded me that roots, whether in soil, in family, or in memory, are what keep us standing when the world tries to tear us down. That night, I wrote a letter to the Historical Society, thanking them for their protection of the oak, but asking one more favor, that they install a small bench beneath it with an inscription. "For those who remember, and for those who will." When the bench was installed a week later, I sat on it for hours, just watching the sunlight filter through the branches. People passed by, waves smiled. The world kept moving, but for me, time felt still, like the tree and I existed in our own quiet heartbeat of eternity. And as the sky turned gold and orange, I whispered to the wind, "You were right, Grandpa. It was never just a tree." The oak's leaves rustled in reply, a sound that felt like a blessing, a promise that even in endings, there can be beginnings. The seasons changed. Spring melted into summer, summer into autumn, and the great oak shifted through them all, each phase like a new chapter in its long, unbroken story. The scar on its bark had healed over time, covered by a thin layer of new growth. The roots stretched deeper, stronger, as if grounding not just the tree, but me too. I'd gotten used to waking up to its silhouette against the morning light. There was a peace in that, a reminder that even after storms, life insists on continuing. The little sapling I planted months ago was now nearly a foot tall, its tender leaves reaching up toward the sun. I placed a tiny wooden stake beside it with a tag that read, "Hope." People still came by sometimes, travelers, families, even students who'd seen the story online. They didn't come to gawk or film anymore. They came quietly, like visitors to an old friend. Some would touch the bark. Others would sit on the bench I'd placed beneath it and just breathe. It amazed me how something as simple as a tree could connect so many souls. One morning, as I sat beneath the oak, Emily visited one last time. She wasn't holding her camera this time, just a coffee cup and a small box. "I wanted to bring this to you," she said, handing me the box. Inside was a framed still shot from her documentary. Me standing under the oak at sunset, looking up, the light cascading through the branches. Beneath the photo, she'd written, "Some roots are meant to be shared." I smile, my throat tightening. "You've given this story wings, Emily." She laughed softly. "No, you gave a heart. I just help people hear it." We sat in silence for a while, listening to the breeze move through the leaves. Every sound felt like a whisper of gratitude from the past, from my grandfather, from every memory that had lived beneath those branches. After Emily left, I stayed there long into the evening. The neighborhood had transformed since everything happened. The new community committee was actually working. People talked, shared, and cared again. The fences that once divided us now stood as quiet reminders of what we'd overcome. I sometimes wondered what my grandfather would say if he could see it now, his old tree, not only alive but protected, loved, and visited by people from everywhere. Maybe he'd laugh, that deep, warm laugh of his, and say, "Told you that tree had more fight in it than any of us." As twilight deepened, the oak cast long shadows across the yard. I stood, brushing my hands on my jeans, and walked toward the small sapling. Its leaves shimmered faintly in the fading light, fragile but defiant, just like its ancestor once was. I knelt beside it and whispered, "You're going to do great things, little one. Maybe someday you'll give shade to someone who needs to heal, too." The wind picked up again, carrying the scent of earth and rain. I closed my eyes and let it wash over me, feeling the quiet pulse of life all around, the hum of crickets, the soft rustle of branches, the steady rhythm of my own heartbeat syncing with the land. That's when I realized something. This story didn't end with the oak. It never would, because every person who heard it, every hand that touched its bark, every child who played in its shade, they were now part of its legacy too. The tree had taught me that strength doesn't mean standing tall all the time. It means standing again and again, no matter how many times you're cut down, misunderstood, or challenged. It means trusting your roots, even when the world shakes around you. And maybe that's the lesson we all need, that what truly matters can't be taken, only tested. As darkness settled and the first stars began to appear, I looked up through the canopy. The oak's branches framed the sky like a cathedral ceiling, timeless and grand. I smiled, whispering softly, "Thank you for everything." A single leaf drifted down and landed in my hand. I held it close, knowing it was time to finally let the story rest, not as a memory of loss, but as a promise of renewal. So if you ever find yourself walking down a quiet street and see an old oak tree standing tall, take a moment to stop. Listen. You might just hear the echoes of every story it's ever held, stories of pain, love, and the courage to keep standing. Because sometimes the strongest roots aren't in the ground. They're in us. And with that, I looked one last time at the tree, my old friend, and whispered, "Good night." Thank you for watching Zarila HOA Stories. Drop your country or city name in the comments. And if this story touched your heart, make sure to subscribe and like this video for more real, emotional HOA tales that remind us some battles are worth fighting, especially when the roots run deep.